Hello friends, my name is Badri and I'd like to share with you a little bit today on the topic of karma yoga and specifically on a really critical and essential part of the yoga teachings with respect to karma yoga. And that's the idea as explained by Swami Kriyananda and our guru Paramhansa Yogananda, that this great inspiration of God as the doer in our lives and in our activities. And as I say, this is a really central pillar of the teachings of karma yoga, as explained in the great Bhagavad Gita by Lord Krishna and explained further by Yogananda and Kriyananda. And the idea that God is the doer in our lives is really critical because so much of our lives are spent in activity and in action. You know, meditation is, of course, a crucial part of our spiritual lives, of yoga practice, but there's only so much time any one of us can spend in true meditation. We should strive to deepen that practice. But the reality is the majority of every one of our lives is spent in some form of activity. As you know, it's very hard to turn off the mind. It's hard to stop moving the body and taking care of the needful things in life. But the more we can bring in this concept and really bring it into practice, that God is the doer, that Spirit is moving through our lives, through our bodies, through our minds and hearts, it really enriches the spiritual life. It brings joy, it brings more success, and many wonderful, just rich aspects of the spiritual life. Our teacher, Swami Kriyananda, illustrates this point in his own autobiography, The New Path, by telling of a time when his guru, our guru Yogananda, instructed him to greet some of the congregation at a worship service. And as people were exiting the building, Swami Kriyananda had the simple assignment, you could say, just to shake hands and greet people, to exchange pleasantries. But after doing this with some dozens of people, let's say, Swami found himself pretty exhausted. And when he mentioned this to Yogananda, his own guru said to him, "It's because you're trying too hard and thinking of yourself, thinking of relating to people as the ego." He said, try to greet people in this simple act of whether it's shaking hands, smiling, small talk. He said, try to think that God is flowing through you. And sure enough, Kriyananda found that there was this rather inexhaustible flow of energy, of joy, that he could share, again, in this simple act. And this is where the yoga teachings are so wonderful in that they are so very practical, that we can bring them and implement them into our spiritual lives, in especially our many myriad activities. There's another story that Paramhansa Yogananda tells that's kind of a fun story that involves the great Lord Krishna, who represents God. And Krishna was relaxing beside the river Jamuna in India. And he was waiting there where every day some of his gopis, as they're called, the devotees or ones who worship Lord Krishna, traditionally women, and the gopis would bring him cheese just as a loving offering to Krishna each day. But as they went across the river to go and see Krishna, they found that the river was in flood that day. There had been a great storm and they could not cross. So they approached a great yogi, a great master himself, called called Sage Vyasa. And Vyasa was there, and as they brought their cheese for Krishna, they asked, could you help us to cross the river, Sage Vyasa? And with a little smile, Vyasa said, if you could just give me a little of that cheese there, then I would happily help you cross. And the gopis thought, well, this is for Krishna, but have a little cheese. And Vyasa had a little cheese and a little more until there was really not much left for Krishna. But the gopis, kind of alarmed at this, were even more kind of astonished when Vyasa then turned to the river in flood and said, "River Jamuna, if I have not eaten cheese, divide up and part." And sure enough, like the Red Sea, the river parts. And as the gopis crossed the river there, again, kind of astonished at the river having obeyed his words despite his eating this cheese, they go to Lord Krishna and they say, "We've brought you just a little cheese that's left." But Krishna was relaxing there and he said to the gopis, I've already eaten too much cheese. That fellow on the other side has fed me enough already. And so you see, and the story illustrates this principle, that the great yogi Vyasa was only thinking of Krishna, of God, in this simple act of eating cheese. And again, in a sort of a fun and light way, this illustrates this really important principle, that the more we incorporate God as the doer, moving through our hands, our feet, our thoughts, our interactions with others, we can really have this deep, increasingly rich spiritual life. So in closing, I'll just give you kind of this homework assignment where very simple activity you can bring into really anything in your life. And if it's a karma yoga shift, or if it's something alone or in a group, you can simply pause, let's say for 3 breaths, at the beginning, at the middle, and at the end, and just close the eyes if you can, and focus at the point between the eyebrows, just for 3 simple breaths. And as you do this, try to feel spirit moving through your breath, moving through your body in that moment of stillness, and then resume your activity. And in this simple way, you can bring more and more into practice the idea that God, Spirit, is moving through you in your life and in all activities, and bring you greater and greater joy and happiness.